Hi everyone, welcome to the session. Today we are going to talk about how you can integrate Amazon Bedrock into your n8n workflows. So what we're going to cover in this session is we're going to go through how you would set up Amazon Bedrock or just your AWS account in general so that you can use n8n to access some of the Amazon Bedrock models. So if you haven't heard of Amazon Bedrock before, it's basically a way that Amazon provides for you to access some of the more prominent large language model providers. So if you're thinking about Anthropic or if you're looking at using Llama, a lot of those are bundled in with Amazon Bedrock. So this is the workflow we're going to build in the session today. It's just a very basic workflow. It's just got a simple form submission where we're just going to take in a prompt. It's going to use this basic LLM chain block here, which is connected to our AWS Bedrock chat model. And within this, we've actually set up a bunch of credentials so that we can access Amazon Bedrock. But what we can do is if I execute it here, it should pop up with just a simple prompt input. So I'm going to put in a prompt here. So I'm just going to ask it to write a story about robots underwater. I'm going to hit submit. And when we do that, I can close this block here. You can see it is triggering off straight away. And if I open up this basic LLM chain block, we can see our normal prompt over here. And the output we can get is from here. So what is happening behind the scenes is it's actually taking our input prompt, it's sending it to Amazon Bedrock. In this case, we're using the Claude Sonnet v4 model. And so it's getting a response and then returning it as part of our basic LLM chain block. So obviously after this, you could hook this up into further processes. So you could, for instance, maybe schedule an email, or you could send off a social media post, or whatever it is that you want to build into your workflow. So that's what we're going to build today. Stay tuned and I'll show you exactly the steps to set up this workflow in n8n. We're going to start off in the AWS console. And what we're going to do in the console here is we are going to set up an IAM user that n8n will be able to make use of when it's accessing Amazon Bedrock. So to do that, we go over to the IAM console. So if it's in this recently visited, you can click that. But if you haven't, you can go up in the top and just type IAM. And if we click IAM here, so here we have the IAM dashboard, and we're going to go down to the left and choose users. So what we're going to create here is a user, and what that means is that our user in the AWS console world is going to have its own set of security credentials. And it's those credentials that we're going to use to then put it into n8n so that it can have access via this user to the Amazon Bedrock APIs. So to do that, we're going to go over and click Create User. So here you can choose a name, and I'm going to just call it n8n Access. So it's important to give it a name that you can recognize because later down the line, you might want to do a security audit and you want to make sure that you don't accidentally delete users that are being used by different applications, whether third party or otherwise. We don't need to provide Amazon managed console access because this is going to be accessed purely by APIs from n8n. So here we have a couple of options, and the one that we're going to go with today is we are going to attach policies directly. So from here, we can actually choose from a number of AWS provided policies. But the thing that I've noticed when doing this myself is that there's no policy that specifically just allows access to the invoke operations on our Amazon Bedrock APIs. And so what we're going to do instead of choosing one of these policies is we're going to create our own custom policy where we can specifically state what it is that this user is allowed to access. Now, I'd recommend whenever you're building on AWS that you always use least privilege. So that means that you try and have as little permissions given to a resource that is needed for that to operate. So in that way, you're keeping your system more secure, and there's less chance that your system's going to accidentally do stuff that's nefarious in your account. So to create the policy, we're going to click on this Create Policy button on the top right. That's going to open up a new tab, and from here we will be able to specify exactly what permissions we want to have for our application. So from this policy editor, we can go and select the service. So I'm going to just type in Bedrock. And then when we do that, we can see all of the different actions that we are able to grant permission to for this policy. So you can see there's quite a few of them around, and you can have a look at all of these in your own time. For this use case, we are only interested in the invoke actions. And so what I'm going to go and do is it's under read, there's invoke model, and there's also invoke model with response stream. So I'm just going to select those because I want to add them to our policy. Next up, we can go down and there is a resources section. So policies are basically rules that are applied to different resources in AWS. And so in this case, we can actually specify which resources this policy applies to. I'm not going to do that for now, and I'm just going to go with all. But if you want to specifically scope down exactly which models your role is allowed to access, you can do that via this resources section. So for now, I'm just going to ignore that and just choose all. And the last thing I want to show is if we go back to the top and we go to JSON. So from here, you can see that it's creating a statement and it's got these two actions and the resource is just a star. So this is basically what the policy language looks like. And this is what's going to be created as part of our policy. So that all looks good. So we're going to go over and click next. Here you can provide the policy name. As I've said before, keep it descriptive so that if you're doing an audit later down the line, you can quite easily glance and see what this policy is meant to be doing. So I'm going to call this policy Bedrock invoke only. You can provide a description, it's optional, and you can also provide tags if you want to be able to group it with other resources in your AWS account. So next I'm going to click create policy. Now that our policy is created, we can go back to the other tab and complete creating our user. So here we are back in our create user wizard. And what we can do now is because we've created that policy, we can just refresh here on the top right. And now if we type in Bedrock, we should be able to see that this Bedrock invoke only, which is our customer managed policy, is now available for us to add. So I'm going to click this box. The other option that I'm going to click is this Amazon Bedrock read only policy. And that is because when you're integrating with n8n, there's a couple of features such as being able to list the available models in Amazon Bedrock. If you don't allow this Amazon Bedrock read only, that means that you won't be able to get those nice features like listing the models. It's a little bit more permissive than what might be available in a more scoped down policy that you might create yourself. But because it is read only, there's low chance that it's going to be able to do things like interacting with your Bedrock models and things like that. The thing you want to avoid is having policies that are going to be able to either delete different models or do things that are going to be destructive in your account. So this one is fine for our use case today. And so what I'm going to do is once we've chosen those two policies, I'm going to go down to the right and click next. So here we get the user review panel. And so what we're going to do is just check that we've got our username is correct, what we want to call it. We've got these two policies. You can also tag it if you feel you want to, but we're not going to do that. And we're just going to hit create user. So now the user has been created. The next step is we want to create some security credentials. The security credentials are basically an API access ID and an API access secret that are together form a credential set that we can then load into n8n. So to do that, we're going to open up the username. Here we can see a little bit of information about our user, such as the ARN. So this is a unique identifier that's specific to this user in AWS. If you ever do any sort of logging, or if you look into things like CloudTrail, you will see that your n8n installation will use this user in those logs. So if you ever want to do troubleshooting as to what n8n might have been doing or what a process might be doing, then you will be able to look for this specific ARN. We'll go down to the tab here. There's one tab called Security Credentials. Here from the Security Credentials tab, we are going to go down and there's a section called Access Keys. The important thing to know here is that you're only able to create 2 access keys at the same time. Having 2 keys allows you to rotate the keys in a more secure way. And the way you would do that is if you have a key that's already in production, for instance, you might generate a new key You would then be able to replace the key in your application. You can have both keys running at the same time, and then you can deactivate one key and check that nothing breaks, and then you can go and delete the old key. So we're not going to use two keys, we're just going to use one. But to do that, we're just going to click this Create Access Key button. Here you can choose from a couple of options. A couple of them just do the same thing, so I would just recommend clicking third-party service. What you're doing here is you're clicking that you understand the nature of the long-term credentials that you're about to create. What is very important to note is that once you create these credentials, they are basically going to allow access via this user to your AWS account. And that means that anyone who has these credentials could potentially access your account. And if you have too wide of a scope applied to those credentials, you could have a third-party actor that does nefarious things to your account. So be very careful about the security credentials that you are generating. So it's important to keep your credentials safe as you would a set of passwords for maybe your banking details, because in the same sense that if you were to, for instance, commit these to GitHub and they were to leak, you're going to potentially cause a lot of harm to your AWS account. So this is what you're clicking that you understand, and by doing that, you can click the next button. From here, you can actually give a description for your key. So you might want to put in like when it was generated, or if there was a specific reason why you're doing it. It's optional. I'm going to just click Create Access Key. So here you get the access key ID on the left, and you get the secret access key on the right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy down these two credentials, and these are going to form the credentials that we can then use to connect n8n into our AWS account. So I've taken note of the access key and secret access key. That's pretty much all for the AWS account. You can now click Done. The last thing, I'll click Continue as well. The last thing I just want to show you is that if you ever do leak your key, or if you ever have a problem where a key goes missing, or you have someone that potentially gets the key and starts doing nasty things to you, what you can do is if you go down to the right, under this access keys, you can go to these actions and you can deactivate the key. And when you do that, when you click deactivate, it basically disables access for that key into your AWS account. And so that way you can kind of lock it down and lock it out of your system. So we're done in the AWS console. I think the next thing we can do is go over to our n8n installation. Here we are in our n8n installation, and what we're going to do from here is we're going to start off by creating our AWS credential, which is how we're going to tell n8n how to access our AWS and Amazon Bedrock APIs. So to do that, we go to the top right, and there's a little down arrow. We're going to click that, and we're going to click Create Credential. Here we get the option to create a new credential. We're going to type in AWS. And when we select that and click Continue, we are prompted with the input for our access key and our secret access key. The thing to note here is because we were using IAM, IAM is actually a global service, but when we are going to be invoking our Bedrock models, they're going to be invoked on a region level. So that is why you need to specifically choose the region in this configuration. And the region you choose is very much dependent on where your application is hosted. And it's also dependent on where you need to keep your data. So if you're working in a regulated environment, you might be a little bit more conscious about which regions you want your data to be processed in. I will show you a feature called cross-region inference, which is a way to get better reliability for your AI models, but it is also a way that you can potentially have data going into different regions. I'll talk about that a bit later, but for now, I'm going to choose Ireland because that's the region that's closest to where I've installed n8n. And I'd recommend doing that because you want to have low latency between Amazon Bedrock and potentially your n8n installation. So I'll copy in the two credentials I got from my AWS account. With those two credentials added in, I can now click Save. So you can see here the connection test was successful, which is a good sign. The last thing I want to do, and I highly recommend it, is just to give the credential a name that represents what it does. So I'm going to call it AWS Bedrock Access, and then I'm going to click Save. So now we've created the credentials. So that's going to allow our n8n application to connect to Amazon Bedrock. And so the next thing we can do is now integrate this credential into a workflow that will be able to invoke the models. To create the workflow, we can go to the top right and create a new workflow. Here in the workflow editor, we can go and click our first step. And I'm just going to make this a on-form submission step. And here you got to give your form title. So I'm just going to say prompt input. And the form element I'm going to add is a field name. I'm going to just call it prompt. The element type is a text area. The text area is a bit bigger than just the text. We don't need to have anything else in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit execute step. And that's going to just populate our workflow with a bit of data that we can then use in subsequent steps. So I'm just giving it a simple prompt to write a story about robots living under the sea. So I'll hit submit. And when I close this box, you can see that it's now populating our workflow, so we can then use that in subsequent steps. So I'll go back to the canvas. The next block we're going to add is the basic LLM chain. And before we configure the actual chain node itself, we'll just click back. And we're going to click this model input, and we're just going to open that out. And we're going to choose AWS Bedrock Chat Model. So when you do that, you're prompted with the option to select the credential set that you want to use. If you've got more than one credential set, just select the AWS Bedrock Access credentials that we just created. The next is model source. So here we have two options. The first is the on-demand models. So on-demand is basically the default that Amazon Bedrock provides. The thing to bear in mind here is that different on-demand models are available in different regions. So depending on the region you chose when you set up your credential, you may or may not have access to all of the models that are available in Bedrock. The thing with on-demand models is that when you are making a request to an on-demand model, it will be served in the region that you are processing in. The downside of that is that if your region is out of capacity or there is capacity issues in that region, you may incur an error when you're making an invoke to those models. An inference profile allows you to potentially move that data to a different region to handle that inference request. The downside of that is that if you are working in a regulated environment, you just need to make sure that you are able to process data in a different region to what you have stated in your compliance requirements. But when you use a inference profile, there is a better chance that your request will be serviced. So you generally have a better reliability with the inference profiles if you are able to move data across those regions. So the way they've segmented the inference profiles, if you are in the EU, for instance, you will most likely have your data serviced by another EU data center. If you're in the US, it's similar for that. But just bear in mind that you need to make those checks if you are working in a regulated environment. I'm going to choose inference profiles because that's going to give me the best reliability for my requests. Next, I'm going to choose the model. And if I click here, you can see that there are a couple of models that are available. Under each one, you can also see, because we're using those inference profiles, which regions your data will be processed in. As I mentioned, if you are regulated, just double check that you can process data in these regions. But for now, I'm going to just choose Claude Sonnet because I'm just generating stories, not that important. So with our model chosen, we've basically configured our Bedrock chat model. And so what we can do is we can go back to the canvas. And the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to configure this basic LLM chain block. So I'm just going to double click on that. Here we can define what is going to be used as our prompt for our model. And to do that, we're just going to go to this middle block, the source of the prompt. We're just going to open that up and we're going to say define below. And then what we're going to do is we're going to grab the prompt over here and we're going to just drag it into this prompt user message. The rest I'd recommend just keeping as defaults if you're following along with this tutorial yourself. So this is essentially what you need in order to invoke the Amazon Bedrock models. And if I click execute step, you'll see it will take a bit of time, but what it'll do is take that prompt, it will pass it to the chat model, it will get a response, and then it will output in the right here. That took a little bit of time, but we've got our output story, and you can go and have a read through it and see what the Claude model has come up with. That's all for our workflow. What we've done is we've now connected our n8n installation to Amazon Bedrock, and we've got it to call our Claude Sonnet v4 models. So the last thing I'm going to do is just show you how you can delete everything so that you don't incur any costs after this demo. We're back in the AWS console. The only thing we really need to do is delete that IAM user. So we'll go over to IAM. We'll open up on the left, we'll open up the users. We will just select this user and we can hit delete. When you do that, it is prompting you to deactivate access to the key. So when we do that, from that point on, once it's deactivated, your n8n will no longer be able to call Amazon Bedrock. We just type in confirm and we can delete the user. So there's no real cost to having a user in your account, but from a security point of view, you might want to just delete it in case that key goes into the wrong hands and someone starts to use it. From our n8n installation, we can just go to the right of the workflow. We can archive that. And when we go to credentials, we can also go to the right and we can delete the credentials. So now we've done that, we've basically cleaned up everything from this tutorial. That's it for today. Hopefully it's been useful. Hopefully you can start to make use of Amazon Bedrock in your n8n workflow projects. If there are any videos that you want to learn about AWS or n8n in general, just post them below. I'll happily read those and I will be able to create content based on your needs. Thank you and goodbye.